the last couple of weeks, what we've done is we've looked at a pretty traditional or very old Renaissance technique, which was doing an underpainting using limited color palette first. And then we've also, there we go, there's Fiona. And then after that, last lesson, we looked at then overpainting on top of that using the skin tones and things, and then building up successive layers of colour on top to create the effect of the skin over the background black and white. A lot of the Renaissance painters did this, and then they had a limited colour palette back on top of that when they painted. But today, contemporary painters often use like a really rich variety of colours in order to be perhaps a little bit more expressive and things. So we're going to have a look at some of those artists today. I'm going to introduce a few of those, and hopefully I've got a couple of videos. Last night they didn't work when I tried to stream them directly from YouTube, so I've downloaded them today so that we can watch some videos of other artists both talking about their portrait work, but talking about how their work, how their ideas affect their practice and why they produce the work in the way that they do. I've got quite a number of artists actually that we can look at. So I've made a list of those artists and put them onto the website. And so you can have a look at those in your own time, but I'll also put links to the video. Sorry? Have I frozen everybody?
No.
No. I think it must. It was that you, Linda? Did you say that?
Are you frozen, Linda?
Yeah, you've got your hand on your cheek. Sorry. Anyway, right, I'll continue. Hopefully Linda will be back with us in a minute. Right, okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about these artists. Now, the great thing about what we're doing today is it will give you more of a chance to experiment with colour and to really get into kind of a flow. And I've talked a bit about this probably previously. When you get into the zone with your art, time becomes irrelevant and you're really focused on what you're doing. So hopefully this practice today will help you to get in the flow with mixing colour, with looking at tones and shadows, and experimenting a little bit with paint. Because what we're going to do is we're going to look at some other artists' work and we're going to have a go at copying one, and then the following week we're going to then try to do that with working from a portrait photograph and applying some of those techniques to that photo in the second week. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the old studio wall. So the last lesson we were looking at this lovely happy chappy over here, and I was painting him. We did that with the Renaissance technique that I've already mentioned today, and then I've also shown you various things like this, where you start with a kind of almost black and white background and then we build the colour on top in lots of detail. We also use the colour charts that show you how to mix a whole variety of different skin tones. Really, because there's such a wonderful variety of skin tones in the world, wherever you go, it's often something that you need to experiment with and find your own way around. So this is why people often think, oh, there's got to be a certain way of doing skin tones. There might be a certain way of painting them for individuals, but it depends on the lighting, the warmth, the coldness of a picture, as to how you use the colours in any given portrait. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a couple of artists' work here that use colours in really bold and bright and exciting ways. I'm working on this one over here at the moment. I've chosen this one purely because of the really strong lighting in the picture, and because of the really lovely bold use of reds, and there's greens in there, very contrasting. You've got this lovely yellowy background as well. So and the other thing about it is you can literally see very particular areas or bold patches of color within the picture. So you've got these nice strong highlights, you've got these red areas, so it's a really nice picture to look at as far as mixing the skin tones go, but also looking at how other artists interpret that. And then the other artists, so I don't have the name of that artist at the moment, but this one is quite a well-known artist called Paul Wright. So let me just bring him to the top of my pile so I can put him in front. There he is. Right, so Paul Wright is an English artist, and he's quite a famous one as well. He's been going for about 15 years, but he's really popular because he does these beautiful brush strokes which layer on top of each other and then actually result in quite an effective and emotive painting. His work's changed quite a lot recently because he now does, he paints his children quite a lot. As opposed to simply doing portraits. And then this artist here, the other one, I can't remember his name at the moment. I've got a video on him and his name is mentioned on the website. But again, you've got these really, really beautiful impasto palette knife layered paint on here. And the thing that this artist is interested in is showing emotion in his work. So you've got this really thick layered effect which kind of maybe reflects something to do with the emotion of that particular sitter. So these are some of the artists that we're going to be looking at now. As I mentioned before, what I'd like to do now is try to play a couple of videos to inspire you a little bit and give you some ideas, because I do this all the time. I look on YouTube and I find videos about other artists and what they do. Sometimes it's just really reassuring to see that other artists are working either in a similar way or a completely different way to you. But it also gives you some hints and ideas about how you might approach your own work too. So I'm going to have a go at playing one of these videos for you now. So we're going to go over here. So let's have a look at this one. Seems to be going all right.
For me, painting is like drinking water or eating. It's something with me all the time. I cannot live without it. I lived most of my life in Damascus, in Syria. I studied there. And then I moved to Lebanon the end of 2012 because of the war. So I moved there with my 2 children. We decided to move to London 2016. It's a city that I really love. Music is a big inspiration in my work. I always paint with music. The main theme that always comes to my work is self-portraiture, and I love to paint movements. I do this by painting many layers on top of each other. I don't choose many colors. I just spread all the colors that I have on the palette, and then I work without knowing which color I'm gonna choose. Sometimes I work in a very strong brush stroke, and on the same painting I work in a very classical way. If I'm obsessed with something, I study it, I read about it, and I meet people, and I took a lot of photographs. Then, when I go back to my studio, I just stand in front of the white canvas without knowing what the outcome will be. I want the whole experience to be like a discovery. I think understanding a human being is like understanding the whole humanity and the whole universe. very much interested in their feelings, in all their expressions, especially the eyes. So the mirror become my best friend because I'm understanding the changes happening to me year by year. I've had this chance to do a residency with King's College, and I told them that I'm interested of meeting women who experience trafficking, and it was very, very tense and inspiring and at the same time disturbing. I went back to my studio and I start to work instinctively without planning. So I'm not able to depict these women because of security issue. So I collaborated with acting students and I asked them to do some gesture for me. I took a lot of photographs again and I used them as models for my work. Every moment in life changes you. Every new experience changes you. The war changed, love changed, death changed, everything. So I think my art is changing in a way because it's a reflection of my way of viewing life, it's a reflection of my personality, even of my emotions. I want my paintings to shake the viewer, to move him, to make him ask questions, to change him in a way.
And this is the second artist, another famous
I suppose
artist.
I have a firm belief in comfort zones, and I like to operate outside of those comfort zones because I think those are a dangerous place for artists to work in. I think as soon as you start getting too complacent in the studio, that's when interesting things stop happening. In 2008, I was victimized as a result of my sexuality in Canada. And the only reason I discuss that is because I think it's made my work political, and it's taken this idea of masculinity and identity and sexuality within paintings, and it's made me, I suppose, somebody who has a perspective on that subject. To me, it comes from a very, I suppose, sinister, very personal place, and it's an outlet to you know, I don't want to go as far as say it's a call to arms, but it's definitely, I have a vantage point, I have an angle, and my work has become political since that point because I have something to say. I definitely think there's an element of darkness to the works, but I think sometimes people misinterpret that with thinking that I'm going to be a dark person. Recently, the past few years, the concept has been kind of falling by the wayside in favor of the technique, because I do pay a lot of lip service to the idea that I call myself an abstract painter. And I think in place of the perhaps darkness of concept, you see maybe a joy in exploration of technique. I get a lot of young artists coming and talking to me and saying, how do you pave your way as an artist? And I always say three things. It takes talent, hard work, and perseverance. And I think for whatever reason, maybe I'm an idiot or maybe I'm just dedicated, but I have a lot, well, I don't know if I've got talent, but I've got a lot of hard work and I've got a lot of perseverance. So despite, you know, some negativity and rejection and adversity, I've always had a really hard work ethic and I've always pushed myself very hard. I get a big smile on my face when I'm asked about Regina because I'm from Regina and my family is there and I have a lot of friends there, and I've not had like a noteworthy solo show there ever in my career. So in a personal way, I mean, a show in London is amazing, a show in New York is amazing, a show, you know, in Cape Town, fantastic. But there's a real personal drive to the show at the Art Gallery of Regina that I think is unparalleled for any show I've had yet.
There we are. Okay, so a little bit of inspiration for you. I often find it really inspiring just to see the amount of paint they're using and how thick and creamy it is and how nice it is when it goes onto the canvas as well. But what I really like is like the lady who was talking there, she was saying how she doesn't always know the final outcome of what she's doing. And she's kind of waiting for something to happen when she looks at that blank canvas. And with Segaldo as well, it was really interesting just to see him applying the paint, little bits of colour on the surface. So Today, what you need to do is on the website the list of artists that you can choose from. I've also posted a whole load of different paintings. So what I suggest you do is choose one of those paintings, or find a picture of one of the artists that I've listed on the website that you would like to paint. And then the first task will be to obviously draw that picture out using pencil. You can prepare a background as well. So I'm going to show you my one that I started yesterday. Let's just go over here. Oh, got to put my camera on. And I just put my camera. There we go.
It's a very strange view. Your hand just disappeared in a picture frame.
I know, it's the green screen thingy. Right, okay, let me go back. See if I've got me now. Yes, I've got me. There we go. All right, so this is the one that we've been working on when we did the underpainting and then worked over the top in layers. So we've kind of, if you haven't finished that yet, please give yourself that time to do that. Let's put my, there we go. Hello. Right, so as I said earlier, I'm working on this picture at the moment, which I've got over here as well. Hello. And what I did first of all is I drew it out, but before I drew it out, I prepared a background of this ultramarine. So this was a thin wash, almost, using a flat brush like this to create a flat background. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the nice effects that you get with the little bits of blue coming through your picture, such as along the side of the ears and stuff, are quite nice when you start putting in the background layers. So this is a case of building up successive layers of paint, and the more paint you kind of put on top, the more kind of opaque it's going to become, but also you get all these interesting colors coming back through the colors that you've already put down, if you see what I'm saying. What I find is that as I'm working on this, I'm constantly trying to adjust and change the colors that I'm putting down to get it a little bit closer to the colors that I can see on the picture. So this is where your layering of colors will start to take place. So if we have a closer look at the picture, the way to start working on this really is to think about the to get a general kind of skin tone to give you a base to start from. So if you look at sort of the lightest skin tone, so actually I'll have a look at this first. So if we look at the lightest skin tone here with this highlight around this area, if you go slightly darker than the lightest one, then you will have a pretty close general sort of skin tone. And then if you get another one which is between the darkest and the lightest, so let's say something like this one just here, then you'll have a general sort of shadowy skin tone. And then you go either way, each side from both of those skin tones, in order to sort of play around with the paint. So it is a little bit, you know, I've given you kind of a little way to start in there, but it will be kind of a case of, like I was talking about, the flow of when you're working. You'll start to pick up the colours and the paint as you progress with the picture. When I did this one, when I worked on this, what I did actually do is I got that sort of shadowy skin tone because I'm working on the shadowy side of the face. And then I did put in some of the shadows quite loosely in this area to begin with. And then I started to add more detailed skin tones back over the top. And then I went lighter and put in some of the highlights and so on. So it's a case of, and I do advise, you know, maybe work out from a small area rather than work on the whole thing. If you prefer to work on the whole thing all at once and put all the shadows on, then generally put all of the highlights on, do that. But at some point, which is what I tend to generally do, is work on the whole thing and then I focus in on a particular area afterwards. So you work on, if you want to work on the whole area, the whole of the face, do that, and then start focusing in on one area, and then you'll start to get into kind of this flow that I've been talking about this morning. Obviously you'll be able to see me working as I do this to give you an idea, but the first thing you'll need to do is to find a photo to work from. So one of these artists would be brilliant to work from. So we've got this one's Paul Wright. He uses these lighter skin tones on here, and then these two are on the website as well, so if you wanted to try out either of those, that would be marvelous. All right,
Jamie, are we using acrylics?
Yeah, sorry, we've been using acrylics for the last couple of weeks, so I thought we'd carry on with acrylics for now. I am actually thinking maybe we could try oil pastels at some point. That might be perhaps towards the the last week, and then if we do extra classes we'll do a bit more oil pastel after that, if people want to do that, of course.
Secondly,
Yeah,
are you making the features a little bit more angular?
what you mean, as in the way that this is painted, sort of thing?
Even your initial drawings, they look, say, when you've got the, particularly around the eye, where you try to catch the, well, it would be where you go to marking the shadows, they look very much more like straight lines.
Yeah, certainly a lot of the brush strokes and things in these pictures do have this kind of angular kind of effect to them, don't they? So yes, and that's partly, I suppose, and we've talked a little bit about this as well, is when we do when we're working on contouring, weren't we? We were doing lines that go around the shape of something. The brush strokes reflect the direction or the way the shape and the form of the object or the subject is painted as well, to get that 3D effect. So yeah, sometimes you can use or often you can use angular brush strokes and lines as well, just to help you describe the shape and the form of your subject. Does that answer? Yeah, that answer your question.
So Jamie, are you not doing so much blending this time then?
You'll find, yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't look like it's as blended, does it? But there's an element of patching in colour like this, but at the same time you'll find that when you put different layers of colour on top of each other, those colours kind of blend in. But as far as actually blending two colours together, there's not so much of that on this one, which so it is a little bit of a different approach to when we did this chap, where there was a lot of blending. So we've kind of got another skill here, haven't we, that we're looking at today. Yeah. You can use there's a mixture of things going on here. So I have used what I've done is I've sometimes added a little bit of the titanium white or white paint to the colour when I wanted it to sit on the top a little bit more. But often, sometimes, you get the colour right, but it's a bit more thinner, and I just put it on anyway just to see what will happen. So you're kind of playing around with both of those things according to what you need to do on the picture you're working on. But certainly with the patches, there is a more opaque element to it, a thicker element to it. And certainly when we looked at the videos, those artists, they were doing very thick layers of opaque paint, weren't they? So yeah, you're right there, I would say, Phil.
Okay, so anyway, we're going to now be just drawing out your picture first. Remember that to start with, you may decide that you would like to use a different method to what I'm using right here now. So I am drawing this freehand, and you can see down the center of the eyes both ways, that I've already used construction lines to help me get started with this, with sketching out the drawing. Don't worry if it doesn't look quite like the original at this point, because later on when you come to drawing your picture, you can make adjustments, or when you come to painting your picture, you can make adjustments as you go along. And indeed, this is just a line drawing. So when you start adding tone, color onto your picture in acrylic, then you will see it change quite dramatically. So as you can see, I've drawn out most of it. I do make a few corrections though, because I realised perhaps the lips were a little bit large, and I want to put in a few indicators of where things go. So I just adjusted the eye slightly. One eye on this picture was actually slightly bigger than the other one, so that's why you can see the difference just there. And he also had a little bit of an expression which you can see coming through on his eyebrows too. So carried on just drawing the outlines only of this picture, and then I launch into using some darker colours, because I'm going to just add in some tones and shadows to begin with. So I'm using here just a couple of colours. On here I'm using Venetian red, burnt umber and raw umber, and that's giving me you know, a good enough darker shadow to start painting in the picture. I'm also just defining some of the areas of shadow and looking at some of the shapes in order to start learning about the picture that we're going to copy today. So following that, I've then added some more yellowy colours to the picture, and now I'm using a smaller brush to refine some of the smaller details in the picture. In this particular part of the video, I'm just working on the shadowy side, and I did that on Monday night with my art class, and then I switched over to the other side the following day, and then just touched up a few areas on the dark shadowy side later. And this is me waving my hands about explaining things. So one or two people asked, oh, well, what do I do to get started? Because this is very different to the previous lesson where we looked at doing an underpainting. So basically what I said here is that I've started with the darker tones, like I've just explained to you. But if you just a bit stuck on how to get started, the best way to do it is to look for like a general kind of mid-tone. So look at the lightest area of skin colour and one of the darkest, and go kind of in between that to get you started with a general kind of skin tone. There are quite a lot of other colours in the picture as well, but those are often kind of highlights and tints, and then or you might add a bit of colour to add some shadows as well. Like some people like to use blues and purples for their shadows. In this case, the artist has used yellows on one side of the face, and then some warmer, deeper reds and browns on the other side. So at the moment, I'm just trying to work out the different planes and areas of the picture that I'm going to be working on by patching those in. Obviously, in this case, I'm working directly from another artist's work. So in a sense, all of the answers, as far as colour, as far as where the shadow is going to go, are in the photograph already. So, you know, really this is also an exercise in just mixing colours and observing colours, which is a fantastic way to learn about painting. One of the nice things about this as well, as you can see, is that I put this ultramarine wash or background in using acrylics as well, which gives me a nice base to work on. And also when you start to add your highlights and your shadows on top of this background, they start to really sort of stand out a lot more, particularly with the whites, than if you were working on just a plain old white piece of paper. So we're building up quite a bit of colour here. You can see I've worked into the eye quite a bit as well. Yes, the white of the eyes are white, but in this case, because it's in the shadowy area, I've created kind of a more of a greyish sort of colour in there to bring out those areas of shadow in the whites of the eyes. And the same goes actually on the other side, which you'll see me painting shortly. So as with layering colours on, what I'm looking for is where I perhaps need to adjust the colours slightly or change the colours a little bit as I'm working along. Also constantly checking back at the original picture just to see if I need to adjust where things are, as well as far as the shapes and forms go, as well as the colours in the picture. And I couldn't resist it at this point, putting in the nice bright yellow background in there. So I've used a bit of cadmium yellow, but a lot of lemon yellow in there, and obviously lots of white. Now the white is really good because it's opaque, so it sits very nicely with acrylic on the top of the blue background rather than merging in with it and creating a kind of a green. So that's the way I've created this kind of thick layer of paint. A bit later on you'll be able to see how some of the blue around the size of the ear and the cheek over there have been left empty because I kind of like the way that little bit of blue pokes through the picture. The other thing about blue next to all these oranges and reds and so forth is that orange and blue are opposites on the colour wheel, so that makes those colours kind of a bit more, it makes it look a bit more kind of punchy and contemporary as well, I suppose. So a little bit of blue poking through the side there against those oranges and browns creates a really nice contrast with those complementary colours. So the form and the shape of the shadowy side of this lovely chap are coming through. I'm just adding a couple of highlights. Most of the time I'm using a small filbert brush to apply the large areas of or the dashes or the contours of colour, the larger ones, and then I switch to a more pointed, smaller brush to get into those details. So that'd be a round brush. Brushes I'm using aren't expensive brushes at all, they're just quite cheap ones actually that you can buy on Amazon, and you get loads of them, so if you ruin one of your brushes or whatever, you don't need to worry because you've got some more. So you can see me adjusting that grey. I was very interested in that grey over there and how it would stand out in some areas and be highlighted on others, so I constantly work over that area as I do some other areas as well. So you can see me just touching things up, making slight adjustments, and this is where the fun I think begins, because you start to see the picture, but you can tinker with it and you can just add a little bit of colour there. You'll notice me using my finger sometimes. I can't resist the temptation just to push a bit of the paint around the surface of the paper or the painting, just to kind of blend it very subtly with my finger. It's nice to have that that contact with the picture in a very physical way too. So we're nearing the end of that session, but we're going to go straight on to the next part of this picture next, which was the left hand side as we're looking at it here. So already we can see the portrait starting to emerge. Right, okay, so that was me just introducing very quickly there, and we're back into the portrait now. So one of my favourite things to do is the eyes. So I often start with the eyes purely because it brings the painting to get it brings the painting and the character in the picture alive very quickly, and kind of inspires me a little bit as well. So I often work on the eyes to begin with, and I love in this picture how that particular eye that I'm painting at the moment has this lovely reflective and glassy deep quality to it. So I started working on that. Now on this side of the picture we have lots of very light areas and yellows, these like pale yellowy colours. So I start straight away trying to block in some areas of that. And you can see how I'm using like these brush strokes or dashes with a thicker filbert brush. You can just see my plate there, how I add a little bit more of yellow ochre into the picture. And then a lot of this picture I'm using this Venetian red, which is kind of a browny red, which is really useful for getting a quick general skin tone when you add white, but it's nice to add a little bit of warmth into the picture as well. So you can see how it's building up, and it's quite interesting with these flat areas almost of colour. Oh, that was me explaining something just there. There's the original. So I continue on with the painting now, of course, and I carry on adding these highlights. Now you'll notice that a lot of the lines or the brush strokes aren't blending as such at the moment, but I am building up almost like a base painting, which I can then go over with either smaller brush strokes or blended areas. So by blending I mean like some of the tones and shadows or tints and highlights might be very similar to each other, so even though they might be dry with acrylic, they do start to sort of meld or blend in, if you like, with some of the other colours that are present. And you also see on this screen anyway, a lot of these colours are very intense. Some of the browns, the Venetian browns, which look very intense red on here, are a little bit more subtle on the original picture. So that's how it looks different, but I still quite kind of like it. And then you've got some nice greens appearing on the picture as well in the shadows. As I've said earlier, a lot of the time people like to use nice blues and things as their shadows. This artist has used some greens in there, so I've been putting those in. Now they're not just a pure bright green. I've mixed little bits of brown and perhaps a bit of yellow ochre in just to tone those greens down so that they don't dominate the picture, a bit like the reds are at the moment. And then I just added a little bit of a highlight onto the lips there, and that brought those forward. So you've got this lovely kind of where the Cupid's bow is on the side of the lip there, it's highlighted, and then it goes really shadowy on the other side. So I don't use black very often in my paintings because I like to mix a nice dark colour, but I just couldn't resist the temptation this time, just using a touch of black, just a tiny bit, with some of the browns. So to get the really nice dark, almost black browns, what I do is ultramarine mixed with a bit of burnt umber, and you get quite a dark tone. But if you want to just push it even more, I often use a little bit of black, and that kind of just sends it right in there. So it's a very enjoyable picture to do, and it's really fun to work with all these really bold, strong colours as well. And the thing I like about this is that we've got this lovely yellow which reflects some of the tones on the skin as well. the photograph that I've got on my desk, as you can see it there, is a little bit more, because of the printer, the colours come out a bit more faded than on the computer screen. So sometimes if you're painting and you want to see the vividness or the intensity of your colours, then you can put them on a computer screen and you can often see them a little bit better. So you can see a lot of the colours are starting to merge a little bit more now, because there's a little bit more subtlety between them all, particularly on that cheek there. The red isn't standing out quite as intense. Those little bits of red around the eyes aren't standing out quite as intense as they were before, because there's other colours around them now. The red on the other side of the face kind of reflects on the right hand side of the face, reflects what's on the left hand side of the face too, so it kind of brings those little areas together as well. So I'm adding a bit more tone and shadow on the top of the forehead, and I'm just now touching up a few other areas, adding a few extra highlights to bring the picture together. I probably would have tinkered around with this picture a little bit more, but we just about came to the end of the lesson, so I may do that next time. There we go. Now that lovely bit of black there in the background isn't actually black, it's like a deep greeny sort of colour that I've created there. You can't see it so clearly on here, but it does add a bit more depth into the picture, so it creates some sort of sense of a background in there as well, and kind of quieten down the background, if you like. So there we go.